Let me introduce to you Susan McSwain, who is the Director of Reality Ministries in Durham. A number of you will be going to visit Reality Ministries. If you're not going in body, I would encourage you to do it virtually sometime to their website to see the variety of things in which they are involved. And Susan is going to be the MC and introduce this panel and lead this discussion. The purpose of which really is to say, all right, the things we've been here about and talking about today, what's going on in this part of North Carolina that we need to know.
I just realized I don't have any kind of timepiece or anything, so if you want to tell me, just give me a slide. Okay, great, awesome. So the organizers of the conference felt like it would be great at this point in the day for us to get to hear from some folks who are local, who are doing work around the intersection of faith and disability. And so first I'm just going to ask everyone to introduce yourself, and we'll pass the mics around. So thank you. And if you would just say your name and the organization you're representing, and just a brief snapshot of what you're doing.
Hello, my name is Jeff Sutton. I'm with Johnny and Friends Ministries. Our closest office is in Charlotte, North Carolina, maybe 2.5 hours away. We cover the southeast from Virginia all the way down to Miami, so a lot of square miles there. My background is sort of funny. I was in finance for about 30 years, and when I was let go with 750 people all on the same day, which was the best day of my life. I realized I didn't want to do that. I worked with Billy Graham for a couple of years, enjoyed that, and then someone on staff at Johnny and Friends thought I would be a good fit there because of my background in mission work, and I've enjoyed that very much. My job is a church engagement coordinator. It's a big ministry, and there's lots of different facets, but the church engagement is I go out and speak to churches and talk to pastors about beginning disability ministries, and if they already have disability ministries, try to equip them to increase it.
Great, thank you, Jeff.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Guthrie Lloyd. I'm an hour and a half from here in Greensboro. I work with Salvage Garden. The nonprofit specifically created an embodied worship experience so that all of our bodies can participate as the body of Christ. We also offer sibling and family support programs, and we encourage faith communities to have the conversation about what a wider embrace can look like. We think a lot of faith communities are doing a great job of welcoming and including, and so we're challenging folks to ask how we can have a wider embrace and how perhaps inclusion can actually look like expanding how we think about difference. The other hat that I wear is mom. I have 3 children, but my second child has multiple diagnoses and disabilities, so my work is very personal as well.
Hi, I'm Elaine Marcus. I am here representing the 11 JCC, that's the Jewish Community Center, and an initiative that my husband and I started called Bridges, which is an attempt to implement inclusion throughout the Jewish community, especially in the areas of play. We were very fortunate to get a National Inclusion Project grant for our summer camp. The person who's supposed to be sitting here is the camp director, but guess what? Camp started. So I'm here in her place and very proud to tell you that we are meeting with great success, small steps at a time, and some of it is thanks to Susan, whose program I visited early on, and I just got so excited by what she was doing, I had to do it too.
My name is Matt Frazier. Excuse me. I'm with the Ruth Sheets Adult Care Center, which is an adult day program that meets here at Eden Street United Methodist Church. We focus on providing day programs, day services for folks with Alzheimer's and dementia It's a way to keep them living in their own homes. It's a way to provide them with the things that they need in their day to help guide them through the things that we all need to do, things such as exercise, cognitive activities. One of the benefits to me is knowing that they get to come into a church like this on a daily basis as just kind of a basic starting point. Most of these folks are folks in their 70s and 80s and been going to church their whole lives, so it's a sense of comfort for them. And that's what we try to establish in the program, is a basic, comfortable spot for them to get their day started, to keep them doing well. We have a nurse that's with us on a daily basis. We provide lunch, we provide snacks, we provide activities. We rely a lot on volunteers. We need to do intergenerational activities. For example, today we have a group of youth who spent part of their day at the food pantry this morning getting hot and sweaty to then come and join us and play cornhole and serve snacks and have fellowship with the older adults with Alzheimer's and dementia. So we're getting an exposure to that. Here in a few minutes, the children from the daycare center that attend this church are going to be playing with the grandmas and grandpas. So we've got two sets of different youth that are coming to join our folks today, which is, to me, another fantastic piece. So that's a little bit about the Ruth Sheet Center. I'm thankful to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse Huddleston, and I'm the worship director at Citywell United Methodist Church, which is located in Durham, North Carolina. Interesting fact, not ordained, so kind of like you, was like not expecting to be here, was asked and recommended, but happy to be here. I think one of the exciting things that we do at Citywell, I say we because I'm here with Tekilah, who will tell you a little bit about herself. I think we think a lot about listening, and we think a lot about offering. Those are two particular covenant practices that we really lean into. And I find that so often power is at play, and who we listen to or who we give space for offering gifts. And the reality is that everyone has a voice. And so it's important to listen to those voices, particularly the ones that are harder to hear. And everyone has a gift to offer. And it's important to create space for everyone to offer those gifts, particularly if those gifts may easily be pushed aside. And so I've been blessed to be at Citywell and experience worship in a lot of different ways and be invited to reimagine how to create more liberated worship spaces for everyone to participate in. So I do that mostly with music, but as it happens to be, sometimes worship isn't limited to music. So I get to be here today for a little bit to talk about what we're doing as it relates to varying abilities. Tekilah, do you want to talk now?
Introduce yourself.
Hi everybody, my name is Tekilah.
Awesome. Do you want to say anything else right now, or wait till we get going?
Wait.
Okay, great. Okay, if y'all want to pass that mic back down to this, to every couple of people have a mic. So I'm just going to throw out some questions, and we're not going to get, let's try not to just go down the line. But just anybody speak up and let's, I feel like everybody here has so much we could learn, so many stories, so many things that you're doing and the work that you're doing. But we're happy to get to hear from you guys. So I'd love for you guys to share something that you're really excited about in your work right now. Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start. First of all, I don't work. I'm retired. But I am very familiar with the initiative that we're doing at the JCC. And I think one of the most exciting things for summer anyway is that our inclusion aspect of camp has grown probably beyond our borders, which is a good thing. We have started a teen group, which I think we're really proud of, and now we have employment for people with special needs at the JCC. So our original goals were multiple. One of them was to spread awareness throughout the Jewish community in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Hillsborough, Goldsboro, Greensboro, anybody who would listen to us. That is met with some success and less success depending on the particular synagogue. But we keep plugging ahead. So I guess that's what excites me, is that we can keep plugging ahead, and we do.
For me, I think the core service we provide is that day program that I was describing. It's during the day, during the week. And then we also have a support group that meets twice a month for our caregivers. In addition, another piece that this church has helped bring about is a memory cafe, which is meant for the caregivers and the persons with memory impairment to have an opportunity to go out and have dinner and some entertainment. So both they're getting out of the house, they're in an inclusive environment that's a comfortable spot, and not having to worry about some of the things that they might normally be concerned about in a restaurant, whether it's misordering information, saying the wrong things, inappropriate behaviors, etc. And they're able to do that and get home by about 6:30 and be ready to start their evening routine. And so to me, we've got our core service for the participant that has a memory impairment, we've got something for the caregivers alone, and now we've got something for the caregivers and the participant as well. And that's a really exciting piece, just trying to keep everybody together and keep offering different things for them.
Okay, right. Got it. And also, we're going to try to have some time for questions at the end, so if you think of questions, jot them down, because you'll have a chance, hopefully. Okay.
In Greensboro, I'm excited that Salvage Garden is able to do two things at once. And this is partly stirred up from our conversations all day here today. Salvage Garden does offer a specialized worship service. So it originated as a separate worship service for individuals and families with disabilities. And that was a struggle at first because we want to be one community instead of a separate community. But what we have realized is that things happen organically, and people do need community that is like them. So moms want moms groups, and dads want dads groups, and alcoholics and addicts, and so on and so forth. And so many families do gather for a specialized ministry. But what is happening is that this worship service happens on a Saturday, and these families and individuals are then taking what we do back to other faith communities. And so Salvage Garden is able to really do something that is specialized and generalized. And so organically, individuals are taking back to other faith communities ways of reimagining worship and including different bodies.
I think we do. One thing that I'll say I'm excited about, we have a sharing time that's a part of our service. And it's kind of a mixed bag because you never know what you're going to get, which is why I find it to be exciting. It can also be a little scary too, because we will have our sermon, which the sermonizer changes every week, just about, and there's usually a prompt to reflect, and the room can respond, and anyone can respond. And very often, two of our friends, who I believe are connected to Reality Ministries, at least one of them I know is, they tend to share every week. And sometimes it's a prayer request, sometimes it's a short answer, sometimes it's a long answer, sometimes it's an answer that is spot on. I remember one time, I don't know if you remember this, Tekilah, I remember one time Nathan was describing the body of Christ as a candle. And he said, God is the fire and we are the wax. And I was just like, I I wanted to like write a song or like, I still have held on to that. It comes back to me every now and then. And I was just like, that was so profound. I've never thought of that.
And it may have taken a minute to get there, right? Like,
yeah.
But
yeah. He often talks about things in chronological order. But yeah, in Spanish sometimes it's harder to understand. But we hold that space, even in the sort of awkward frustration that you can kind of feel it. But we hold that space, and I think it's exciting, again, to, like I said earlier, find space for listening. That's one thing.
Yeah. Hey, Tekilah, would you talk about a little bit about the women's retreat? So, Citywell women took a retreat. How many women? I don't know, 70 or something. And 5 of our friends of different abilities just came as part of the women's retreat. There wasn't a special retreat for the special people. There was just such intentionality around including any women who wanted to come in the retreat, and it was really wonderful. So Tekilah, would you tell us a little bit about your time at the retreat?
It was a good women's retreat. I got to spend it with my sisters from Citywell, and I really had a great time with them, and can't wait to do that again.
Awesome, thanks.
Well, what I'm really excited about is the earlier panel mentioned as well. It just seems to be a real groundswell of interest in disability ministry, and it's really exciting. I mentioned I'm a numbers guy. I'm not always sure God is. I think he's more of an artsy guy. In 2017, I got to speak with about 10 different churches, one-on-one with learning sessions, or multiple churches about beginning disability ministry. This year, we've already done 10 again, and we're only halfway through the year. And it's just, I just sense it growing faster and faster. It's very exciting. More people being reached.
So would anybody be willing to share a challenge that you've experienced? Or anybody, yeah. And how you approached it and what you've learned from it that you would share with us? Or it's all just idyllic?
Oh, at one point I was living with my grandmother, and then I did enjoy that. And my grandmother got sick that she couldn't raise me anymore. So at the age of 10, I moved to a group home, and that was nothing like home. And I didn't like it one bit. And then later, I started going to reality ministry, and that wasn't a home for me, but it felt like I wanted to be there a lot. And when it was time for me to go back home, every staff or anybody that worked at reality always asked me, could I go home with them, because I didn't want to be at that group home. And then later, I moved into the corner house that is home for me.
Thank you, Tekilah, for sharing that. If you come to reality on Wednesday night, you'll get to hear more about the corner house.
I agree that there's so much interest in ministry with persons with disability. And I think, for me, language is very important. So I'll always try to describe ministry as ministry, not necessarily special needs ministry or disability ministry. So hopefully that just invites you to think about ministry differently. I agree that interest is there, but a challenge that we find, that I imagine most of us experience, is identifying the resources to actually accomplish what needs to happen. I had the opportunity to teach at the School of Divinity at Wake Forest, which is in Winston-Salem, and it's an add-on, like we're finding in many places. And the interest, the students, the families, they want to have more conversation. They want to improve what churches and faith communities are doing. But the challenge is that funding is not there, and that the pool of people who are fully invested they are burning out. Many of us are parents and advocates and wearing multiple hats, and so the challenge across the board is often finding the resources to accomplish what we see as our visions.
One challenge that we face at the Jewish Community Center, and I suspect a lot of programs face, is really embracing inclusion. I think there are a lot of programs, and we are guilty of the same, where we have people with special needs attending their programs, and it has taken us a while to make inclusion part of the DNA of the building, of the staff, of everything. So I feel like that is an ongoing challenge. How do you keep it totally inclusive?
I think for me, probably it's very similar lines. It's that we have the general plan of what we want to need to accomplish on a daily basis that we've established through developing the program, but then it's an individual basis, which kind of gets at the inclusion. We have differences amongst whether it's just different types of dementia or ways people react to the different environment, and trying to keep them all together on the same page and accomplishing the same thing to a satisfactory nature. I think that's just our both big and small kind of problems at the same time.
Yeah, I'm really resonating with a lot of what folks are sharing. What comes to mind for me, I think, is creating space for folks to have authentic relationship with one another. I think we have different things in place that allow for that. Whether that's our small groups, we call them wells, or different events that we'll have, afternoons after worship on Sundays. Like right now, for instance, we've been trying to recruit people to help pick our friends up, our family members up. And I think it's easy for like one or two people to kind of feel really passionate and committed to sort of being that direct person. Some of those folks actually live in the North Street community. They're deeply connected to the reality ministries out here on staff or regular volunteers. But I think there are more people who are sort of still figuring out what it means to like just do life together outside of their sort of what feels normal to them, and what feels convenient or more familiar. So my prayer and my hope is that we'll have more spaces and more opportunities for folks to get lunch with Weston or hang out, and it not necessarily always be like a special event that is created just for these particular community members, but allowing them to participate in everyday life and being thoughtful enough and prepared enough so that they're set up for success and they're set up for an enjoyable time together with other friends. So that can be really hard to figure out how to do that well.
Well said. Thanks, everybody. So, what do you guys see as the core issues that we must attend to as we consider the intersection of faith and disability? What do you think that social service agencies and faith communities and people who care about this community need to be thinking about and attending to? What are the most important things?
I talk to a lot of people who intellectually realize they're not a problem. It's other people's problem. I'm glad there's other people working on the thing. And the problem we have really is accessibility, but it's not our buildings, it's people's hearts. If you open it up and realize how God has cared about you and how you need to care about others. And many times when I'm speaking, I end up preaching to people. I don't mean to, but it changes people. And it changes people when you try to look at people through God's eyes. It changes you. And that's what we need to do.
Tekilah, do you have a thought? If you could say what you think is the most important thing that you would like to tell other people about what you and your friends are hoping for and dreaming of, what would it be?
Well, I went to the well with my friend Christina and her, well, not her husband, and my other friend Corey, and I went to this Spanish, because that's what kind of well I went to, and I was learning Spanish with them.
Yeah. So, when we were coming over and I was asking you about your friends at City Well, you named Christina and some others, and those friendships grew because of that time in the small groups together. So the friendship is something that you would say is important?
I love friends.
I thought you were going to say a puppy, so friends are good. That make me first. Okay, who else has a thought?
Two things come to mind. I think I already said organic in some of my sharing. I learned that no matter what I learn from theologians, that our efforts really need to be organic. I learned a lot from different models of ministry and from different theologians, but in order to meet the needs of individuals, it really must be relational. And so what I've learned at previous institutes, I needed to adapt to the community where I am. And that happens by having relationships with individuals. A second thing that comes to mind, I also learned at Institute from others, and that is that there is a risk I found in trying to translate other people's stories. My son is mostly nonverbal. That doesn't mean he's non-communicative, but he taught me, and the other Institute experiences have taught me, that I don't have to translate his story or his experience of faith and of God. In our worship experience, for example, my son will participate, and as much as I love language, I don't need to pretend that I must tell his story through my words. So his voice can simply be his voice, and I don't have to translate for our community or for the world what his experience is. So I think there's this risk, if I could summarize my thought, that we must use words, and helping other people have a voice doesn't mean we have to use our words to tell their stories.
For me, I think the adaptability plan is a key piece of it. We've got our plan, we've got an idea. We've got information like in my head that I know this is what I want to do, but it doesn't necessarily matter in the moment. It's got to be right for the person that is there. And that's probably the biggest key, and trying to kind of merge that old school, that way of doing it, the tradition of doing it with the way that the need is, and trying to, how do we best determine. For us, sometimes it's difficult to know if the person understood the message that we're trying to get, or how well they liked it or didn't like it. And there are certain things that we can use, whether it's body language or the way they're participating, to help determine their reactions, behaviors, that we use as our cues to help us know, yes, that activity is working well, or no, that activity is not working well. And then certainly music becomes a key component of that. And again, for our folks that are older adults, a lot of the old hymns become really good ones that they can, when they can't speak sentences, they can still sing several verses of Amazing Grace, for example, which is wonderful. So trying to incorporate little things like that is part of it, I think, that is helpful.
This is a little far afield from the question, but I was in a session earlier today where we were talking, the presenters were talking about sort of catching up, that the whole subject, the whole being of people with special needs in houses of worship, in places of play, without stigma, where their differences are simply that, their differences. It was said much better than I'm saying it. But I will tell you this, both my husband and I have worked in the field of special needs for our careers, and we have special needs members of our family. And when we heard that the JCC was going to be built, we had just one thought. It was, when the doors of that building opened, people with special needs would not have to knock on the door after the fact and say, can we do this? Can my child come? Because we know the burdens that are already there. So we put this in place before the building was built. And that's how I met you, Susan. We were talking to the parents, to the people we were trying to serve. And I think that was the key for us. We didn't pretend to know what they wanted and needed. We asked them, and then we tried to deliver. So I know that's not what you asked.
That's great.
But yeah, but I think that is critical to remember why we are doing this and for whom. It is for ourselves, for sure, but we don't help anybody if we don't ask them what they want from us.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah, I would, I guess, elaborate on something I said earlier about uncovering and naming and investigating power, and how that shows up even in our places of worship. I think it can be really easy to center voices, center particular ways of singing and preaching and reading, and oftentimes I think, you know, if you're educated, wealthy, straight white man, you know, the power arrangement flows in a way that is centered around those kinds of individuals. And it can leave a lot of people on the margins of varying identities. And so I think it's so important to be talking about power, collectively, systemically, how it is arranged. You know, like I mentioned earlier, we have different people who preach every week. And so on one hand, that can seem kind of scary because, like, well, you know, is it going to be good? Is it going to be consistent? You know, you can ask these kinds of questions. But what does it mean that different voices are being heard? And so in that similar kind of way, I think in any given Sunday, we can show up and feel really, really empowered to offer what we have and to show up and be present. And on any given Sunday, we can also feel disempowered, feel limited, feel unable, regardless of what our actual abilities are, right? And I think it's because we're having, or at least trying to have, these harder conversations around power. It's allowing us to see gifts, again, that are normally decentered and bring them to the core. But it's also allowing us to decenter voices, ways of being, ways of doing that can become burnt out, right? And that can become overused, overheard. And so I think there's a more kind of liberated, protected, balanced, equitable space that we try to cultivate. But it necessitates critical conversation around power. So yeah, I think that's really, really important in these kinds of spaces. to really investigate that as thoughtfully as we can. I think the more that we do that, the more honest we can be about what we're able to do, what we're not able to do individually, but also what we're able to do collectively, and honor that, and also honor what we aren't able to do, and go from there.
Thank you, Jesse. Should you want to say something, Jeff?
Yeah, I really want to echo what Melissa said about that it's really all about relationships, our relationship with God and our relationship with our fellow man. But in the process of me trying to convince people they need to begin a disability ministry, gee, they're thinking about that, and it's not a program where it's going to have an end on July. It's a process. It's a ministry, just like children's ministry, just like music ministry. But also there is great joy, just like in the other ministries in their church. There's great joy that comes out of that. It's there for us to reach out and give.
One more question, or should we open up space for questions? Okay. Without the watch, so look out. So I'd just like to hear what you're dreaming about. What ideas are emerging as you do what you're doing and think about what you're thinking about? What are you hoping and dreaming for the future?
So, for me, I'd like for what we do to expand in other churches and to be a popular thing. Children's daycare centers are in a lot of churches, but adult daycare centers are not in very many. And so that's really kind of my ultimate dream, is that it's a more mainstream way of operating and keeping those that have Alzheimer's, dementia, memory problems involved in daily life.
Resources.
Amen. I'm dreaming and hoping that more faith communities experiment with sensory and embodied worship for persons with disabilities, but for all of us to embody our faith, because most of our traditions, Christian or not, are very embodied traditions as they are. The other hope or dream I have is that Institute looks different. There are a lot of smart and beautiful people. We get to see all your faces. A lot of smart, beautiful people here having important conversations. But my hope and dream is that so many more people will have these conversations.
Yeah, I resonated with that, if you couldn't tell. I'm expressive. Yeah, I think about music a lot, and sometimes I wonder, what would it mean to do music without words, and so that we're just sort of hearing instrumentation, or what would it mean if we were sitting in silence, or just different things, because I think it gets us out of our head, it gets us out of how we normally conceive of God, of ourselves, of others, and it deconstructs that, and it allows us to reimagine what's possible. And the few times that I've been a part of spaces like that, it just feels so liberating, and it feels so affirming, and it feels like God is here, God is doing something that we couldn't do in and of ourselves. So yeah, I really resonate with what you were just sharing. Trying to, again, kind of, I imagine just getting out of our own comfort zones, as basic as that might sound or seem. It can be really hard, especially since there is a kind of helpfulness in having consistency and regularity, and trying to hold that space to that proper negotiation of doing something different, but also being really able to guide people in a process. And sometimes it's helpful to have consistent rhythm so they know where you're going and know what to expect. But yeah, I would hope that if we can trust the Spirit, if we can trust that we're being led with love and with truth, that even if I guess it is a little awkward, if it feels a little disjointed, it may not finish right on time, it may go over, or if these things don't matter as much, then perhaps it frees us to, again, hear the voices that we're not hearing, to pay attention to the things that we're not noticing.
So we have such a wide range of people doing such different kinds of things in different ways. Does anybody have any questions for these folks? No. Or just thoughts that have been prompted that you'd be...
You're having this conversation in your community with people. What would the conversation be like? And what questions?
So for your services at Salvage Garden, can you explain a little bit more of what that might look like?
We describe our service as structured flexibility and organized chaos. We are very family friendly. We started clearly with a hope that persons with disabilities would participate, and more than half of our worshipers now have no connection to disability. And I think that's because of the hospitality and the embrace that they experience. But we do have an order of service that is printed, that is the same at all of our worship services. That order of service uses words and picture exchange communication. So a speech therapist helped us shape our materials. We do use visual aids and sign interpretation. But all of the elements of our service, which is 45 minutes in length, give or take, are fast-paced, so that perhaps the music, which may overstimulate one individual, it can be anticipated, and it can also be known that it's 3 minutes instead of the majority of the service. But each element tries to use one of our senses. And our traditions really lend to that. The most common are baptism and communion, or the Lord's Supper, but it's very easy to take what faith communities already do and to make them sensory-based. So if we tell a story, we also try to present it visually or through touch or taste. That's briefly about what we do.
Comments? Questions? The words have been spoken right out of you.
This is about like a very specific small thing that was said, but you were talking, is it Alyssa? No.
Elaine?
Elaine. No, with the stripes.
Okay.
Melissa, okay. About your son, who is mostly nonverbal, and how you've kind of questioned wanting to put his story into words, but feeling like that isn't important, or isn't, that his voice can just be his voice in the way that it is. I think so I've thought about that a lot, and I feel like the issue can be, a lot of people won't take the time to listen to that voice, or it's harder to pay attention to. So maybe could you share a little bit about your journey of arriving at the place of deciding that that wasn't something you needed to do, and how you landed there?
That's a good question.
It's an ongoing journey. I love words, and God gives me a child who doesn't use words. God has a sense of humor. I think the biggest piece of my journey has been the affirmation that each of us is made in God's image, and that a period can reside at the end of that. So my son in God's image is enough, without my narration or my explanation. And part of that is that I just can't explain him. I can't explain him in the grocery store when an incident or behaviors happen, and I can't explain him and his relationship with the divine. But he is made in God's image, as are you and the people outside. Period.
Questions?
The adult daycare question do you have like a model that we could take a look at to make it more, to have more churches be able to take a look at that?
The quick answer is yes. I mean, part of it is that we are limited in space and size and have our focus that we need to do. But, I've got cards on me, and I'd be glad to show folks whether it's this afternoon or one day away out here this week. Kind of small groups at a time, but absolutely. And I'm willing to talk to folks and share what we do and how we accomplish what we do. Certainly.
So it's right downstairs.
Yes. So when this building, the room that we're in now, this current fellowship hall was built about a dozen or 15 years ago, actually 2001. So the old fellowship hall that had been used for the last 60, 80 years has been retrofitted, and that's what the Ruth Sheet Center is now. And it was basically an open space, an open room like this, and we've built in some offices into it.
So Matt, if people wanted to visit or do something, what's the best way to do that?
So I've got a card here, and I'll be glad to give these out. And certainly on the ESUMC website, there's contact information for the Ruth Sheet Center. Want to make it as easy as possible, so come see me, and I'll give you one of these cards if you need it, or write down my phone number or email address or anything I can do to make it easy to show you what we're doing.
Elaine, I'd like to ask you a question. I think your story is really inspiring because this forward movement towards this community center was happening, and just you and your husband had this vision that you described so beautifully. Did you come up against resistance to that? Like, I feel like for us, like there's so many places that we could say, oh, here's an opportunity to bring this awareness to people who aren't thinking about it. But how did that unfold? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. We really didn't have resistance per se. And I think it's in part because we have a stronghold in the community as professionals who work with special needs. So it wasn't a surprise. My husband was director of the Teach Center, which is a center for people with autism. And I worked with people with emotional problems. So it's like everybody kind of expected it. I think the resistance is always, sadly, well, how are you going to do this? And we just met with a lot of people one-on-one and said, we're doing this and we need your money. And we didn't need a lot. That was the thing. The building was being built. We just needed to accommodate with special bathrooms, make sure there was an elevator. But that was our biggest problem, was just kind of getting all of those things in place. But no personal resistance. If anything, I'd say there was enthusiasm.
Better to build it in than retrofit.
Oh yeah, well, the way we did that, again, we just asked the families who had people with special needs to tell us what to do. They actually became a committee within the planning committee. And when they said, well, there'll be this one bathroom on the main floor, the shout from the committee was, no, not just one changing bathroom, we need several. So almost every bathroom in the building. And the other thing, I am bragging right now, we have a zero entry pool, which was the most expensive way to build a pool. But we had to have it, so we do. So anybody, we don't have the lift chair yet, but anybody who wants to come into the pool can get in. Now getting out, so that to me was just very exciting.
It's not a zero entry pool, it's a zero exit pool.
It's a bonus, you can't get out.
Other questions, comments?
I just had a question about JCCs in general.
Oh, I don't know if I can answer in general.
Are they related? Is it a national organization? I've come across JCCs in a lot of cities.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's just a common name or if there's some, common idea behind it, or what makes a JCC a JCC?
That's a great question, and I'm afraid I'm not the one to totally answer it, but I can give you a general answer. It's really not so different from a YMCA. I mean, that's kind of its goal. It is recreational. In our case, we do have support for hungry people. We run a food bank. We have a memory cafe. So we are serving the elderly. But JCCs are all over the place, and they are sort of recreational centers. It's a place where all are welcome, and that in fact is part of our mission statement. Does that answer?
Sure.
Hi. I'd like to hear more about the Suvya Church and what that's about, and anything you have to say, and who goes, and thanks for being here and letting us know.
Thank you. It's a huge, so open-ended, but I'll try not to ramble. City Well is a United Methodist Church in Durham. It was founded in 2011. It has changed a lot in its history, but it's, I think, always been committed to following the ways of Jesus, and that really being the key model of our time together. I mentioned we have what we call covenant practices. So the two I mentioned earlier were listening and offering. The other two are gathering and welcoming. And those aren't just practices that we use for each other, but we think about how we're listening to God, how are we welcoming God, and how are we offering our lives to God. How does that translate to how we treat one another, both those that are worshiping with us regularly and also just the people that we encounter. And so a lot of those practices continue to come up in our time of worship together. I would describe City Well, I think sometimes people say it's a multicultural church. I think the word I like to use is intersectional. I think multicultural can be a bit vague and a bit loaded. But the context for understanding intersectional, as I've come to understand that term, again, is thinking about power and thinking about equity and thinking about all these different intersections, whether that's race, gender, socioeconomic status, ability, language, age. I think we're trying to really think about all these different things together. And that's why I said power is so important, because there's a particular intersection that can privilege a particular kind of person over everyone else. And so, any given Sunday, you might hear from a white person, you might hear from a person of color, you might hear from a man, you might hear from a woman, you might hear from someone who is neither of those. You might hear from an older person, a young person. You might hear from, and we're really thoughtful about who are we hearing and who are we not hearing, and who's getting to offer, who isn't getting to offer. That's been my experience. I think to conclude my answer, because I don't want to ramble, just a little bit about my personal story. I didn't grow up in the Methodist church. I grew up in church, but not the Methodist church. And what I've found particularly compelling is that it's not a room full of Methodists. I've only been to so many Methodist churches, and often when I go to other Methodist churches, they kind of all look the same. They're usually older and white, and pretty well financed. While we're a younger church, 6-7 years old, there are people of all denominations, Catholic, Baptist, non-denominational, questioning, and I think there are a lot of people who have done church and felt harmed by the church and are kind of coming back in and figuring out what does it mean to worship again. And so we try to hold that space as open-handedly as we can so that people can really encounter God and be healed in whatever ways that they need it. And again, I think that's what I was saying earlier. Sometimes you show up and you're just like super excited and people are like, this is the best church ever and I just want to know everyone, and then that's great. And there's some people who show up and they're just kind of like, I'm tired. I kind of don't want to be here, but I felt I should come. I just want to get my coffee, I'm going to sit in the back, and that's enough. And as you said, we would say to that, you're welcome. All are welcome. Show up late, leave early, it's okay. God loves you, we love you, and we hope that you keep coming back. And we will be as present with you as we can be, as you're here, as you are. So that's my take on who we are, and thanks for asking.
I wanted to just say a word about why I really wanted to have City well represented on the panel. I think when we think about ministry and disability, we think of the church creating a disability ministry, and people have talked about how that first thought of separateness is something that we're all hoping to not perpetuate, but to grow inclusion. And because of what Jesse just shared, I think theology is where the ways that we include others derives from. And so this theology of welcome and belonging and all the things that Jesse just said and listen that we've talked about are what compel us to have friends who are different and to bring those friends with us to church, and not to think of them as separate, but to think of ways that they're drawing us to grow deeper in our faith and where the friendship is mutual. And how do we, I love you keep talking about creating space, and I think that's really what it comes down to. And it doesn't have to look like a program, but it's people who are friends entering in, to the body, life of the body together.
What they were saying earlier about relationship, like authentic, organic relationship being so important, so you don't force things. You also don't assume need that isn't actually there. I think it's really cool the way in which folks like Tekilah and Nathan, you know them, so I assume everyone else knows part of me. But members of the Reality Ministries family community who are helping lead our nursery time, helping with our youth time. We call it City Kids and City Babies. They get to volunteer.
Serving as communion.
Right, yeah, thank you. Who serve as, who help with communion, who sometimes read scripture, right? Again, who respond to the sermon, because they feel convicted and feel led to share something. It's normal. So it's just normal for us. So I believe it can be normal for everyone.
All right, I don't know how our time, are we done? Awesome.
We give them a hand. One of the things that you all got into was, which I think is one of the exciting, really exciting things that's happening, which goes from the way in which, in the last 5 years, for instance, Barbara Newman and people who wrote Barbara's wonderful new book on accessible gospel and worship. Now, the Calvin Institute for Worship is talking about universal design for worship, so it's not accessible worship, but universal design for worship in ways that all of us can participate and include everybody. So you build the structure at the beginning rather than trying to have to retrofit it, and whether that's a habit or whatever. I just finished helping write a short little piece for Shelley Christensen, who's one of our longtime veterans here, who's one of the Jewish leaders in the country. She's got a new book coming out called From Longing to Belonging, which I think is kind of fits part of the journey. And I used a couple of stories. One is that comes from an old Methodist publication back in the 70s. One of the early little books published in this area was a little book called We Don't Have Any Here. And I don't know how many of you have talked to congregations and heard that. We don't have any here. Not too long ago, a couple of years ago, I was talking to somebody who said somebody came to ask their church, this church that they were part of, and said, "Are you an inclusive church? Do you have people with disabilities?" And they said, "No, we don't have people with disabilities here." And then the guy said, "Well, I've been to your church. What about the guy over there in the chair? And what about this other guy who seems to, look a little bit different than this other person?" And they said, "Oh, well, that's just John. He's part of our congregation. And that's just Alex, and that's part of our congregation. We don't think about them as people with disabilities. We don't have people with disabilities here. We just have John and Alex and Susan and everybody else." So it became kind of that's my new vision of we don't have anybody here kind of thing of thinking about of what we're about in that way. And to think about theological education, which has been part of the story today. Dan Ailsher, who recently retired from being the executive director of the Association for Theological Schools, has a really good Southern Baptist friend in Fredericksburg, Virginia, who has a Baptist church that's done a whole lot around inclusive ministries and also specialized programs. They run some residential programs and others. And Dan was invited to preach at their congregation one day, and as you can imagine, the congregation was full of all kinds of people. And he said to me, "Bill, when I got up that morning, I said to myself, wow, the whole people of God finally showed up." All of God's people finally showed up. And so thank you for showing up this afternoon to be part of this community and also helping us to be part and to feel more like we're part of Central North Carolina. And blessings